crimson silks, and crumbling dignity. That's the mood you walk into. The chamber smells like beeswax, roasted game, and something faintly metallic. Maybe blood, maybe just too much gold. You're standing in Buda Castle, early 15th century, in a throne room so stuffed with tapestries, you'd think they were trying to smother the echoes of guilt. The flicker of candlelight off polished armor, gilded mirrors that don't quite reflect what they should. And at the center of it all, Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary, barely blinking, sipping dark wine from a too delicate cup, like he's bored out of his mind. That's when the drums begin. You don't know it yet, but this is the first of many nights when virgins will dance until they collapse. Ordered to, expected to, required. Their collapse is part of the performance. Like what you're seeing. Hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'm always reading them. The girls glide in, dozens of them, barely older than you, each one in flowing crimson silks, hair pinned with pearls, eyes locked somewhere above the king's head, as if to avoid becoming a direct target. Their shoes are satin, their feet already blistering before the music starts. And yes, they are dancing for hours. Hours. You can hear a noblewoman whisper to her neighbor that one of the dancers, the one with the braid, third from the left, was seen being carried away from rehearsal earlier that day, pale as parchment. She's here now, though, dancing again. This isn't ballet, not exactly. It's more like court-mandated enchantment. A series of endless turns, twirls, and precisely timed bows. Graceful, yes, but too perfect to be free. You notice how the musicians don't look at the dancers. They play mechanically, like they've done this every week, like it's not even weird anymore. Now here's the twist. Sigismund doesn't just demand dance. He demands collapse. It's not enough to twirl prettily. You must dance until your legs give out, until you're gasping for air, until your knees hit the floor and you can't get up. That's when the king lifts his hand and the music stops. That's when you're carried out by two silent guards in matching doublets and replaced with another girl from the shadows. One mainstream fact. Sigismund, crowned king of Hungary in 1387, was a deeply political figure, part of the House of Luxembourg, future Holy Roman Emperor, and always juggling crowns, crises, and crusades. But court culture under him? Whole different story. Historians still argue whether the collapse performances were ever documented in official records, or just whispered through memoirs and travelers' tales. Because this wasn't just one freak event. The dance thing, it became a pattern. Not every night, but often enough that young noble girls were being trained, coached to withstand the spectacle. There were rumors that Sigismund believed a woman's spirit could be revealed only through exhaustion. Something about truth and torment. You know, the usual tyrant poetry. And the truly wild part? People applauded. When the girls finally hit the marble, soaked in sweat, unable to rise, the court clapped. The queen, Barbara of Scilly, just to name drop, sometimes even smiled. It was art, they said. It was symbolic. It was deeply moving. No, Barbara didn't stop it. Why would she? Her own marriage was political scaffolding, barely glued together. You get the feeling she stopped having opinions a while ago. So, who started calling them virgins? That's the thing. No one official. But records, okay, suggestive gossip logs, mentioned that the dancers were always unmarried, always young, and always presumed pure. That word, virgin, became the key selling point. A tired girl dancing is interesting. A virgin dancing until collapse? Now that's spectacle. Morality theater. Holiness in motion. Maybe even a weird little nod to saintly suffering. if you squint hard enough. One fringe theory claims Sigismund modeled the performances on religious processions he witnessed during his brief stint crusading. A little spiritual ecstasy minus the actual faith, like importing flagellants, but make it chic. You're watching the red silk puddle on the floor as one girl slips. She tries to recover, pushes herself back up, almost makes it, then finally caves. Her arms are trembling. The music drones on, but she's not moving anymore. The crowd leans forward, not in concern, but anticipation. When the king finally lifts his hand, there's a visible wave of relief. The girl is collected like a prop and whisked away. This is where the ASMR tone kicks in. You're not supposed to react. Just observe. Like the marble statues lining the room. Eyes open, hearts cold. The show must go on. And yes, there were protests. Small ones. Quiet ones. A bishop once wrote that the court's obsession with physical suffering bordered on heretical indulgence. He got reassigned within the month. One noble family tried to withdraw their daughter from the dance roster as citing fragile constitution. Their lands were mysteriously retaxed and their son drafted into a pointless border skirmish. But hey, the wine kept flowing. The costumes got better. By the third year, the girls had matching gold trim on their sleeves. Cute. One theory, and let's just float this like a paper boat, is that Sigismund believed watching collapse somehow preserved his own power. That every fallen dancer was proof he could outlast them. That endurance in the court of the king was transferable. You got stronger by watching someone else fall apart. It's about now that your eyes lock with one of the dancers. Just for a second. She sees you watching. Not the way the king watches, but watching. Her lip twitches, and then she spins away, back into the blur of bodies and drums and marble shadows. You feel a little sick, but you clap when everyone else claps. You can smell sweat under the perfume now. The illusions are breaking down, but the music doesn't stop. Not yet. The king's appetite for spectacle isn't just a quirk. It's a hunger, a steady, deliberate cultivation of control and masquerading as culture. You've seen rulers who collect art, who patronize poets, who build cathedrals so tall they look like they're apologizing to the sky. But Sigismund collects performances, and he doesn't like intermissions. You're back in the same hall, or maybe a different one. It's hard to tell. The velvet is always red, the gold always freshly polished, the dancers always impossibly young. What changes is the intensity. Over the months, the king begins pushing for more dancers, longer music sets, fewer water breaks. The court doesn't even flinch anymore when the first girl drops. And here's the truly sour cherry on top. They say he starts choosing themes. One week, it's purity in spring, and the dancers wear wreaths of lily of the valley that wilt halfway through the set. Another week, it's the serpent and the lamb, and half the girls wear scaled bodices, the others woolen white, like freshly laundered martyrs. The symbolism is not subtle, neither is the suffering. It becomes part of the court calendar. A thing people talk about between bites of honeyed venison and spoonfuls of saffron rice. Are you attending the dance tomorrow? Someone asks, like they're discussing a garden party, not a performative collapse marathon. Guests arrive early to get the best view, close enough to smell the sweat, but not close enough to catch it. And no, this isn't just nobles torturing peasants. Sigismund doesn't trust peasants with beauty. He wants well-born girls, trained in etiquette, capable of collapsing with dignity. There's a kind of cruelty in that specificity. It's not about pain. It's about presentation. You can feel it in the way he leans forward only when the dancers are staggering, but still trying to smile. That sweet spot between grace and ruin. One mainstream historical fact. Sigismund was known for flamboyant displays at court. His infamous Order of the Dragon, founded in 1408, was filled with theatrical oaths, ritual costumes, and a flair for moral posturing. You start to see how that theatricality bleeds into everything. Even this. Maybe especially this. There's one moment, so strange you almost think you dreamed it, when Sigismund introduces audience participation. He commands that every lady present place a ribbon on the wrist of her favorite dancer before the music starts. It's meant to encourage the girls, he says, motivate them. But what it does is turn the whole thing into a silent bet. Whose ribbon bearer will last longest? Whose will fall first? You watch a mother press a ribbon into her daughter's hand, and mouth "Do not shame me" before turning away. It's around this time that the rumors begin. Not just about the dances, but about what happens after. Do the collapsed dancers get medical attention? Are they even conscious when they're carried out? One fringe account suggests a secret infirmary in the castle's underbelly, complete with salt baths, herbal tonics, and a silent nun whose only job is to bind sprained ankles. Another version claims the girls are rewarded handsomely. Gold, jewels, marriage prospects, if they fall beautifully. That last bit feels suspiciously like a bedtime story designed to keep them spinning. And historians still argue whether the records of the 7-day pageant are real. Supposedly, Sigismund once held a week-long spectacle in which new dancers were rotated in every 12 hours, collapsing in shifts like saintly dominoes. The court naturally stayed up to watch. A kind of sleep-deprived devotion. Some believe this event never occurred. That it was a later invention meant to discredit his legacy. Others argue it's the most documented part of his reign if you read between the lines of royal expense logs, linen, musicians, salt tablets, opium. Yes, opium. It shows up in suspicious quantities during this period. Not for the king, oh no. For the dancers. Just enough to dull the edges. Make it easier to keep moving even when the legs say no. You can almost hear the court physician rationalizing it. If their minds don't register the pain, is it really cruelty? Let's pause there for 1 second and let that settle in. The king even starts calling it the ritual. Capital T, capital R. He jokes that the kingdom runs smoother after each performance. Like the suffering of these women oils the gears of government. Of course he's joking, except no one's laughing, because no one wants to find out what happens if they do. Sometimes you get glimpses of resistance. A dancer who hesitates before entering the hall. A girl who sways out of sync, then quickly self-corrects, panic in her eyes. One even fakes a fall early, collapsing before she's truly exhausted, hoping to escape. You watch Sigismund squint at her, tilt his head, then give a small nod. She's not carried out. She's dragged, and you never see her again. By now, the performance is more than just entertainment. It's a loyalty test, a ritualized confession of obedience. To refuse to dance is treason. To collapse too soon is insult. To last too long? That's suspicious too. It suggests you're mocking the very concept of collapse. So the girls aim for that perfect timing. Exhausted, but not too fast. Broken, but still poetic. There's a scholar, somewhere in Vienna probably, who argues that Sigismund's court invented a new aesthetic. Ornamental decay, a performance of failure so carefully calibrated that it became its own form of beauty. She says it's the precursor to modern ballet. A bit of a stretch, but you sort of see her point. You're watching it happen now. A girl with copper hair and barely their eyebrows is the last one still standing. Her arms shake, her neck trembles. Her chest heaves, but she keeps going. The musicians glance at the king, waiting for the signal to stop. He doesn't give it. Not yet. He's watching, sipping that dark wine again, savoring the suspense, and you realize the dance isn't the point. The suffering is the point. This isn't a show. It's a demonstration. And the king? He's always the audience of one. You find the backstage by accident. It's quieter here, not silent. Nothing in this castle ever really is, but muted. The velvet hum of whispered prayers, the rustle of skirts being adjusted, the occasional creak of a joint pushed too far. No chandeliers, just oil lamps and nervous glances. You're in the waiting room, the prelude chamber, and the air tastes like lavender, sweat, and something sour. Fear, probably. Maybe liniment. This is where the dancers wait before being called. And here, things are less pristine. No satin slippers, no royal grace. Just girls, sitting, pacing, stretching, trying not to vomit. Their hair isn't perfect yet. Their eyes betray how young they are. 16, 14. One can't be older than 12. So, who really danced? You listen, and they tell you, if not directly, then with their eyes. Some are daughters of noble houses, pushed forward like ceremonial offerings. Others, their names never make it to the scrolls. Cousins of minor officials, orphans raised by monasteries with potential. The court's unofficial talent scouts, always men, like to phrase it as sponsoring potential. You hear one say it with a straight face. There's a ledger in the steward's hand, marked with symbols rather than names. A bird for purity, a star for discipline, a black slash for disruptive tendencies. One girl giggles when she spots hers. She's a triple star. You don't know whether to applaud or cry. One mainstream fact. Sigismund's court employed dozens of officials to manage events, from ceremonial protocol to choreography. But the dancers? Their records are suspiciously absent from most surviving archives. Historians still argue whether these young women were technically part of the court or just part of the furniture. Here's a quirky tidbit. The pre-dance diet was strictly regulated. The girls were fed light broths, sugared almonds, and, strangely, thin slices of orange. The oranges were rare, expensive imports, usually reserved for ambassadors, but someone, somewhere, decided they opened the lungs for better breathing. One girl chokes one down and mutters, "Citrus won't save me," under her breath. Her friend laughs, quietly, like laughter might be forbidden too. There's a woman here, older, maybe late 30s, which in this context is positively ancient. She's the head of the dance ward, not a choreographer, not quite a servant, something in between. She carries a switch, not to hit with, at least not in front of you, but to tap the tempo during practice. She walks past a line of girls like a general inspecting her troops. A couple flinch when she stops too close. "Posture, love," she says to one. "You don't want to fall ugly." Another callback to that whisper from earlier. Fall beautifully. It's an art form, collapsing just right. Palms upward, chin tilted, legs bent gracefully, not sprawled like a sack of flour. There are drills for it. You watch a group rehearse fainting as though it were choreography. It kind of is. You want to ask them if they're scared, but they wouldn't answer, or maybe they don't even know anymore. Instead, one girl speaks up without being prompted. She looks right at you, like she sees through your watching, and says, "They told me I'd only have to do it once." You blink. "Have you?" "3 times, she says, and then adds, "So far." There are whispers that some girls fake their virginity to qualify, an absurd reversal of every other courtly expectation. A few even buy virginity certificates, scribbled by compliant monks, as if innocence could be notarized. Because if you're not a virgin, You don't get picked. If you don't get picked, your family doesn't move up. It's not about chastity, it's about opportunity. There's another rumor that certain girls are favorites, not lovers. Don't go there. This isn't that kind of story, but muses. Sigismund, supposedly, once asked to see the same girl perform 4 nights in a row. She danced until her foot cracked. Then she danced some more. No one ever saw her again either. A few of the dancers wear charms under their sleeves. You notice tiny sachets of herbs, woven threads from a mother's apron, even a little carved cross pressed between collarbone and silk. Superstitions aren't allowed, of course, but everyone has one. One girl scribbles a name onto her palm with charcoal before each performance. You never see what it says. One scholarly fringe theory goes deep into the psychology of this, arguing that the dance ritual mimicked a kind of secular martyrdom, that Sigismund, obsessed with sainthood and symbolic purification, used these young women as physical metaphors for political sacrifice. You suffer, so I don't have to. Sound familiar? That same theory suggests the collapse wasn't the endpoint, it was the offering. That the real moment of value came after the girl hit the ground. The silence, the breathless awe, the willingness to keep watching, even after the fall, especially after the fall. You watch one girl rehearse alone. She's older than the others, maybe 17. Basically, an elder stateswoman at this point. She moves with weary precision, like her joints remember better times. You ask her if it hurts. She shrugs. It's not about that. What is it about? She looks past you. Being seen. And that's it, isn't it? This isn't a dance about beauty, or even about cruelty. It's about visibility, about proving your worth in a court that won't remember your name unless you fall hard enough to shake the chandeliers. There's a list being read out now. Names, real ones, followed by titles, followed by gestures of gratitude from family patrons. One girl gets up, adjusts her bodice, and nods to no one. Another kisses the wooden floor before walking out. You get one final glance before the chamber doors swing open and the music creeps in again. The next dance begins. The music hasn't stopped, but the story's tempo shifts. You're back in the hall, but now the pageantry feels shakier, like the silks are thinner, the bows a little too slow, the court's applause not quite reaching the eyes. And this time, you're not just watching the dancers, you're watching the watchers, because now you know how many lies sit beneath those velvet cushions. Every person in this room is pretending something, pretending to enjoy it, pretending to approve, pretending they don't flinch when a girl slams against the marble a little too hard. You start wondering, is the king even fooled anymore? Here's your main takeaway tonight. Nothing here is as simple as cruelty. Not entirely. The collapse ritual might look like tyranny, but it wears too many masks. Religion, art, punishment, pageant, for anyone to pin it down with certainty. Virgins, vultures, and velvet lies. Let's start with the velvet. Smooth, soft, luxurious, but always hiding something. You notice the throne cushions look fluffier than usual tonight. That's probably for Sigismund's back. Age doesn't care how many dancers you ruin. It still stiffens your knees and makes you irritable after supper. Sigismund himself leans forward in his chair, eyes sharper than you'd like. Not drunk, alert, watching the dancers with something between amusement and calculation, like a man counting coins that might sprout wings. There's talk behind his back these days, and in some quarters, to his face. Not about policy. Sigismund's still a king, still a ruler of lands, still wearing the dragon emblazoned cloak of his namesake order. but his court is drawing raised eyebrows across Europe. Ambassadors whisper of ritualistic eccentricities, and one Venetian account describes the dances as a saccharine form of courtly execution. Bit dramatic, but not wrong. So, the vultures gather. Some come in robes, scholars from Prague and Vienna, hoping to glimpse the performances firsthand. Others are gossip hounds, noble brats hoping to turn the spectacle into leverage or leverage into a spectacle. You hear one courtier say he's compiling a catalog of collapsed styles. He's not joking. Historians still argue whether this era marks Sigismund's slide into self-caricature. Was he always this theatrical? Or did years of war, betrayal, and political juggling finally make him snap and lean into absurdity? One theory suggests he engineered the collapsed dances as a metaphor for Hungary itself, graceful on the surface, exhausted underneath. Another theory, whispered only by the boldest, says he was punishing the aristocracy by breaking their daughters. Politely, publicly, a passive-aggressive masterstroke. You watch your peers suffer, and you thank him for it. Then there's the religious angle, always lurking. Remember that saintly framing? The way the dancers were called pure, unmarried, symbolic of the Virgin Mary in motion? Yeah, that was intentional. Sigismund, for all his cynicism, knew how to weaponize piety. He leaned hard into church politics. He literally held the Council of Constance, trying to resolve the Great Schism. So wrapping his weird little spectacle in religious imagery, not just convenient, strategic, it made the dancing collapses look like acts of holy devotion, spiritual shedding, a public penance. Don't think of them as victims. Think of them as martyrs, drenched in sweat and trembling. Yes, but radiant with suffering. That was the spin. Even the queen, Barbara of Scilly, remember her? Played along. She sat at Sigismund's side, dressed like a statue, applauding when required, never looking at the girls too long. You hear that she kept a journal. Most of it's lost, but fragments survive, and one line always sticks. It is not cruel if they rise in spirit, though the body fails. Make of that what you will. Of course, there were dissenters. French clerics who decried the rituals as vanity masquerading as virtue. One bishop even tried to stage an alternative pageant, young men reciting psalms until they lost their voices. It flopped. No one wants to watch a baritone cough. You want a quirky tidbit? Here's one. At the peak of the ritual's popularity, a few ambitious households started training their daughters for it. Not to survive it, but to fall gracefully. There were collapsed tutors. Yes, really. Aristocratic dance masters paid to teach the choreography of fainting. One manual included tips like fall toward the light and let the eye glaze, not twitch. But here's what really catches you tonight. Midway through the performance, as another dancer crumples to her knees, someone near the dais laughs. Loud, not malicious, more like a scoff, a bark of disbelief. It silences the room. Even the musicians falter. Sigismund looks up slowly, scanning the crowd. The laugher, young, overdressed, a visiting duke's son, freezes. For one terrifying second, you expect a command. Arrest him, remove him, or worse, make him dance. But Sigismund only smiles, a tight, crocodile smile. Something amuse you, boy? The boy stammers. No, your majesty, merely admiration. Sigismund's smile fades. I see. The music resumes. The room exhales. But something shifted. That moment of unscripted humanity, that crack in the lacquer felt dangerous. Like the whole ritual might fall apart under its own ridiculous weight. And yet it doesn't. The dancers keep moving. The audience claps. The illusion resets. like nothing happened. Later that night, you hear a chambermaid whisper that the laughing Duke's son left early, pale, shaken. Some say he was summoned privately by the king. Others say he was found packing his trunks before midnight. You wonder what he saw, and why the girls keep coming back. The truth? Maybe they don't see it as cruelty anymore. Maybe it's just court life. You adapt, you collapse, you recover, or you disappear. You stare at the newest dancer, a girl with eyes like storm clouds and knees already bruised. She looks straight ahead, never blinking, never flinching. You wonder how many times she's done this. How many times she's fallen for the sake of performance, politics, or preservation. She hits the floor before the second verse ends. Beautifully. Everyone claps. You do too, because it's safer that way. You don't hear the fall first. You feel it. It's like a sound that thuds directly into your spine, a hollow, sharp collapse, and then the subtle gasp that moves through the room like a breeze through dry grass. One girl down, then another. You've seen it before, but this time it hits different, because now you realize it's not random. It's not theatrical flair. It's timed. Collapse as ceremony. The dancers aren't just breaking under pressure, they're choosing when to fall. It's choreographed exhaustion, engineered decay. Each crash to the floor is a bow to the throne, a silent pledge, and the more you watch, the more it feels like something sacred and completely wrong. Tonight, the music's slower, strings drawn like sighs, percussion soft and repetitive, like a heartbeat that refuses to die. The floor is slick from too many previous performances. You imagine it's like dancing on ice, but with all eyes on you and no second chances. The dancers have been going for nearly an hour. No breaks, no water, just the endless sway of bodies moving in ritual synchrony. You can practically hear their muscles scream, even over the vials. One mainstream fact: this wasn't the only time in the history dance was ritualized into suffering. In the late Middle Ages, Europe witnessed outbreaks of choreomania, dancing plagues, where people danced until they collapsed or died, often blamed on possession, mass hysteria, or ergot poisoning. Some historians draw parallels between that and Sigismund's court, except here the madness was scheduled. At first glance, tonight's performance looks the same as always. Virgins in white, subtle gold detailing at the cuffs, faces expressionless, movements fluid. But after 3 collapses, each more dramatic than the last, you notice something else. The timing between them is closing, like dominoes spaced too close. One girl falls, and 10 seconds later, another, then 5, then 2. It's no longer dance. It's a countdown. And Sigismund? Oh, he sees it. His fingers tighten around his goblet. His knuckles flash pale against the stem. The court doesn't notice, or pretends not to, but you're close enough to see it. He's not amused. This wasn't his choreography. Someone's broken the rules. Historians still argue whether this was an act of protest or a botched performance. Was it coordinated defiance or mass miscalculation? Because here's the wild theory. Some believe the dancers that night made a pact to all collapse at once. To weaponize the one thing they had control over, the fall, a final, synchronized rebellion. But they weren't quite in sync. A few hesitated, some couldn't do it on cue, and so what might have been a powerful moment of solidarity turned into a clumsy avalanche of fainting girls, scattered across the floor like petals in a storm. And yet, it works. The audience stops clapping. The musicians falter again, and for once, Sigismund doesn't signal for new dancers to replace the fallen. He just sits there, watching. You can feel the discomfort ripple across the room. A duke coughs. A servant drops a pitcher and flinches like he's about to be executed. The queen touches her throat as if checking that it's still there, and then something even stranger happens. He stands. Sigismund rises slowly. This man who demands others fall. His cloak pooling behind him like blood in reverse. The room holds its breath. It's the first time in months he's stood during a performance. He looks at the floor, at the bodies, at one girl in particular, whose arm is twisted beneath her unnaturally. She isn't moving, not even a tremble. That's when you realize she didn't fake her fall. She's not acting. She's unconscious. Maybe worse, no one dares to move. And then the king starts clapping. Once, twice, louder. The court follows suit like terrified birds. Applause crashing through the hall in chaotic waves. But you can tell, no one knows what they're applauding. Was it rebellion, suffering, perfection, the end? Sigismund doesn't say. He just sits back down, slower this time, and motions vaguely for the guards. 2 men enter. No fanfare, no delicacy. They begin dragging the collapsed dancers away. Not lifting, dragging. The grace is gone. The illusion's cracked. And something in you knows the ritual just died. It won't stop, not officially. The dances will continue. The girls will still be trained. The music will play, but something sacred, if that word ever even applied, has shattered. You overhear a lady-in-waiting mutter, "It's gone theatrical, not divine," as if it ever was. Another courtier says, "He's lost the timing," as if Sigismund's power was always bound to rhythm. There's a fringe theory from a later Jesuit writer that claims the ritual collapsed because Sigismund himself became unworthy. That he fed off the energy of those collapses, but the dancers no longer gave it freely. That final performance, it broke the spiritual contract. Kind of poetic if you squint, but more likely, the dancers just got tired of being pretty metaphors, and so they stopped playing. You catch sight of one of them hours later, being half carried down a hallway. Her lips are split, her eyes are open. She's whispering something you can't hear. Maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. That night, you lie awake in your chamber, replaying the clumsy synchrony of their falls. No elegant, not beautiful, just human. And in that messiness, more defiant than any flawless performance. The next morning, the steward announces that the next dance is postponed. Just postponed. Not cancelled, but it never quite recovers. You can sense it in the way people walk around the castle now, like they're stepping around a broken mirror they're not allowed to admit is there. The collapse wasn't the end of the dance. The collapse was the dance. And now, everyone's just pretending to keep moving. It's quiet now. Not the kind of quiet that follows a performance. Not applause-faded, wine-heavy quiet. This is heavier. A hush with weight, like velvet curtains soaked in rain. You're still in the castle, but everything feels smaller. The halls echo more. The music is gone, and no one talks about the dance. Not because they've forgotten, but because they remember too well. The ghost of the last waltz lingers. You feel it in the way courtiers avoid certain corridors, in the way servants glance at the marble floor like it might still hold bruises, and in the way Sigismund himself, once the center of every collapse, now rarely watches anything at all. That last performance rewired the entire atmosphere. It was supposed to be another controlled descent into beauty. Instead, it crumbled in real time. The king tried to save it with applause, but even he knew. The illusion broke. And illusions don't forgive. Historians still argue whether Sigismund ordered the dance tradition to end after that night, or if it simply dissolved on its own. There's no formal decree, no archival entry reading, "Let the girls rest." It's more like the music ran out of will. You hear that he tried to replace the ritual with the other amusements, masks, firework displays, poetry contests even, but none of them took. Nothing quite filled the silence the dancers left behind. They'd become more than entertainment. They were structure, and when they stopped, the whole rhythm of court life staggered. Sigismund stopped rising during ceremonies, stopped hosting as often. Some days he didn't leave his chambers at all. The queen, interestingly, grew more visible. Barbara of Scilly, once the silent watcher beside him, began writing again. Letters, observations, little prayers in the margins of her books. A half-preserved page includes a simple line: "When the floor stopped catching them, they stopped falling." It sounds cryptic, maybe poetic, maybe just tired. You're hearing more stories now, long after the curtains have dropped, about what really happened to the dancers. Some returned to their families, quiet and changed. Others left the court entirely, married off, or moved into convents. One rumor claims a former dancer became a midwife and refused to take noble clients. Another, darker tale says one girl was found at a roadside shrine, endlessly twirling in circles, refusing to speak. You don't know which stories are true. Maybe all of them, maybe none. There's a fringe theory from a modern folklorist, barely respected in academic circles, that claims the collapse ritual became a kind of curse, that the final performance unwound something sacred, and the court never fully recovered. She insists echoes of the dance appear in Hungarian village traditions, where young women still perform spring rites that end in staged fainting. Too convenient, probably, but still. You think about it every time you pass a dusty hallway and feel a chill. Let's go back briefly to the throne room. It looks the same. Still polished, still gold, still red. But the throne is empty more often now. And when Sigismund does sit in it, his eyes aren't fixed on dancers. He stares into the middle distance, like he's waiting for something that isn't coming. He rules still. Officially, he attends councils, signs decrees, argues with envoys, but there's something absent in him, as if a part of his reign ended, not on a battlefield, not in a coup, but with a single girl hitting the floor too soon. One mainstream fact: Sigismund would go on to become Holy Roman Emperor in 1433, outliving the collapse dances by years. But even then, his rule was marked by disunity, slow decisions, and a lingering sense that he never quite commanded the full reverence he expected. Some say he aged faster after the ritual ended. The court begins to rewrite the past. That's how memory works. People refer to the collapse dances as courtly devotions. Some call them the ladies' rehearsals. Everyone avoids the word collapse now. Too raw. New girls arrive at court, trained in different arts: lute, embroidery, polite silence. The old generation watches them with something between pity and relief. These girls don't dance. They curtsy. They sip tea. They don't know what it's like to be clapped for hitting the ground. That knowledge becomes its own kind of ghost. You still see the old dancers sometimes. Older now, quieter. No one mentions who they were. No one calls them by their old titles, but you can tell by the way they stand, always perfectly upright, even when tired, as if part of them still fears the floor. One of them passes you in the courtyard. She nods. That's it. But her eyes carry entire seasons of ritual in them. You nod back. Some nights, you swear you hear the music again, in the rustle of leaves, in the clack of shoes down the corridor. Your ears are tricking you, sure, but for a moment, your heart races. And then, nothing. That's how it ends, really. Not with protest, not with justice, with stillness. The performance fades, the bruises heal, the stories curdle into myth, and everyone moves on. Except the floor. The floor remembers every fall. You wonder if Sigismund dreams about it, if he wakes up with the sound of silk hitting stone echoing in his chest. You never ask. He dies in 1437, buried with a royal ceremony, wrapped in cloth of gold. Some say his last words were about succession. Others say he muttered, "Let him rest." No one agrees. You don't need them to. The story is over. The music has stopped. And the girls, they're finally still. Thank you for listening. I'll leave you here in the quiet. We're always saying goodbye.